Hello and welcome to Lay's Reviews. My name is Arvid, and I spend much of my time watching movies. Some are good, some are bad, and I'm here to tell you which ones I think are bad and which ones I think are good, so that you will not waste as much of your precious life watching terrible films as I have. And you may very well disagree, but that's fine, it makes life more fun. Anyway, let's get started. Today I will be reviewing my first horror comedy or comedy horror series, or spoof horror or spoof slasher, whatever you want to call it, Scream, which is made by the iconic director Wes Craven, who is probably more famous for the classics Nightmare on Elm Street and also quite fine movie The Hills of Ice, which I probably should talk about someday. Both of them, actually. But at the end of his career, he decided to take a different spin on the whole slasher horror genre, a genre he had helped define, not by making the classic slashers, but still by making horror movies in the same vein as those movies that were popular in the late 70s and 80s, but which by the 90s had pretty much died out as a concept. Nobody really wanted to watch slasher movies anymore, because people had gotten tired of all the tropes. They'd gotten tired of these very predictable movies. And that's why we got Scream. A movie that really just deals with all these tropes, more than deals with them, does them to death while also talking about them. It's very, very meta. This movie is very meta. This franchise is very meta. The whole purpose of it is being meta. And I decided to talk about these films as the 6th installment in the series is about to be released. So here is a chance to catch up on the series, and then I'll probably also do an extra episode when I watch the 6th one. But with all that being said, let's get started. So the film starts with what has later become, I guess, one of its more iconic scenes. So that's the thing with this film. It comments on horror movies and horror movie fans, but it ended up being a self-fulfilling prophecy, but also dealing with those aspects of it. So it starts with a woman getting a phone call from someone who pretends to be a stranger. Turns out he's actually outside her house and wants to play a game with her, that if she gets it wrong, he's going to kill her. He's probably going to kill her anyway. We don't know, but he probably is. He already prepared to kill her boyfriend, so why would he just go away at that point? The game is that she has to answer some horror movie trivia about some of the main slasher genres. Movies in the slasher genre, such as Halloween and Friday the 13th, while also covering other movies like Nightmare on Elm Street and Nightmare on Elm Street. And it has this probably most memorable line from the series is, "What is your favorite scary movie?" And yes, that's how it starts. She dies. It cuts to some of the people who go to the same school, where the lead, played by Neve Campbell, who is actually quite good. She was a very big star in the 90s. I don't really know what happened to her. She just stopped being in things, but I really like seeing her in movies. She has some really, really big roles. So it's sad that she didn't make it bigger in the industry. But maybe she didn't want to. Maybe it was her own decision. I don't know. It also has, and I think this is what the best thing about this movie, it's not about how it comments on horror movies and how it's a big spoof and a big parody and look at how silly all these things are while doing the exact same things they copy, or they comment on. All that is, and actually gets really, really stale and boring very quickly, and it's actually maybe one of the reasons why I don't really like the first Scream here. It's too much of talking about, then in horror movies, if you have someone having sex, if you're not a virgin anymore, you'll die. Or if you say, "I'll be right back," you die. All these things. They constantly talk about them, and they constantly ridicule them, and they constantly talk to each other about movies. They have all the communication between the characters often end up in quoting movies, or even not even quoting, just referencing movies, just saying, "Oh, that's like Die Hard," or "I'll go all something something on your ass," or it's too much. It's just too much referencing. Even in the second and third and fourth, it's self-referencing as well. it's a bit too much for me. But what I do like about the first film is the casting. The casting and the performances, actually. Because this film has Matthew Lillard in it. Matthew Lillard is just fantastic. He was also quite big at this time in the 90s, early 2000s, playing a lot of side roles, side characters. He chews the scenery. And there are multiple characters in this movie that chew the scenery, but none as much as Matthew Lillard. And he plays this stupid jerk. The performances and the casting seems like they took Beverly Hills 90210, whatever it's called. They took people from that, then sped up their acting. Then they gave them cocaine. And just said wilder and more intense. They just had to do everything more cliche. They had to do everything more wild, more exaggerated than the cliches that are already present at this time, but with these different school characters, very one-dimensional, and the colors of the movie is also very Beverly Hills 90210-ish, with very bright colors all the time, very bright lighting. It's very teenage drama to look at. It's essentially, it's not a bad-looking film, but it's such a boring and stale-looking film because it's trying. I think it's because it's trying to copy just the look of its time. That a lot of movies were made in this way with no style, atmosphere, or character to them. Just all these high school drama, whatever movies. Even a lot of horror movies back then looked this very bright, boring, colorful, yet colorful in a very monotonous way. And that's the style you get in this film. Anyway, let's proceed with the plot. So it's the next day after the murder, and her friends all told about the woman and the man, her boyfriend, who were murdered the previous night by the ghost face killer, as he'll become known as. The killer in this movie has a very stupid outfit, a very silly outfit, a very simple outfit, again as a spoof on all the other slasher villains of previous horror franchises. And the irony is then that this outfit becomes so iconic that I think it's intended to be bad in a way, but it is still so efficient in how it looks. It's such a special, unique outfit for a villain that it is something that I remember being a kid. It's something people would actually wear for Halloween. A lot of people would have this costume for Halloween, probably not even knowing where it came from. And I do think, yes, it is probably one of the worst slasher villains we have in a movie, in any movie I've seen. But at the same time, his voice, very iconic voice, he's always stabbing people, so you don't really get much variety there. Which, it's actually, before watching Halloween, I thought it was always people being stabbed, but Michael Myers is quite. He has a variety of ways he eliminates people, but in here it's usually, sometimes there's a gun involved, but otherwise it's mostly just people being stabbed. But so this parody became an icon of its genre, and I guess that's just how our world works. I don't know what I wanted to say with this. It's just, it's not buckling my mind. It's just something I wanted to address. Because, yes, honestly, it kind of looks cool, but in a bad way. But this is our killer. We see him very early in the movie. Of course, masked, so we don't know who the killer is. Her boyfriend, again, another cliche. This movie is just swimming in them. He crawls through her room at night because his father doesn't want him to go sneak out at night. Of course, this is the first night, so we don't know about the murders yet. But also, the girlfriend's father doesn't want him around, so he's not really supposed to be there at night. And it's established that they have been together for 2 years, and they haven't had sex yet. And he's kind of trying to persuade her into having sex, but they don't really go there. But she does flash her boobs at him when he leaves, when he's about to crawl down, which is a very dangerous time to do it. I mean, you don't want to be caught off guard with something so nice, but also something so beautifully shocking when you're about to climb down something that is not meant for climbing. At least that's what I think. It is a cute scene. I guess it's as cute as such a scene can get. And in the next day, the school what's weird about this is this girl and this boy, they were in the same class as our protagonists, but nobody really seems to care about them. They all joke about them dying. I think our main lead, she's the only one who cares about these people. Prescott, I'll forget what to address them in the movie. I forget the names while doing this review, so I'll just call her Prescott. That's her surname. And even we see two boys run around the hallway wearing the outfit, which, okay, this doesn't make sense, because they're wearing the outfit of the Ghostface killer, running around the hallway, pretending to be murderers. Is it not established where they get this outfit? But anyway, they run through the school. The principal expels them. The principal is established as a no-nonsense principal who really doesn't like what the youth has become. He doesn't like how today's culture is. And, again, that's another stereotype, another trope from all these movies, that it's always the out-of-touch older people who always think that things used to be much better and much more sane, much more proper, sanitary, safe when they were young. And that's what this principle embodies. Then, returning from school, our protagonist, Prescott, gets a similar phone call by a stranger who then attacks her. He actually can kill her in this scene, but he's really taking his time. So she manages to shake him off. Her brother arrives, I think half-brother, who is a police officer. He is playing a very central role in all of these movies. And he is playing quite a central role, and yes, he shows up, kind of rescues her by scaring away the villain, but at the same time, her boyfriend shows up. You never really buy him as a nice boyfriend. He's a bit too pretty. He has a bit too of weird 90s hair. Not weird, but not nice guy 90s hair, a bit douchebag 90s hair. And he's not really, in the film, he's never really the big douchebag, not at least not in the first half. But you never really trust him completely, I think I should say. And that plays into this scene. So right after her half-brother, whatever he is, the police officer, shows up, or the deputy, I think he is at this point, her boyfriend also shows up, and out of his pocket falls a mobile phone. And this is the early 90s. Not everybody had mobile phones, so I think that's why she immediately suspects that it's him who called her, because why would he be right at the address? Why would he have a mobile phone? It's a bit of a weak motive, but it's enough for the police to arrest him. So he's taken into the police station. She's taking also to testify and everything, while the news reporter shows up, Gail Winters, and she wants to cover the story. She's also established that you really don't like her. She's this career woman who wants to do everything she can to further her career. She doesn't care about other people. So one of the ways you really realize that this is a terrible person is that it turns out that Gail's mom was murdered the year before, almost to the date. And Gail always saw her as being quite innocent, a very good person. But it's also established in this movie that she was someone who was just sleeping around a lot. She is called the town prostitute, basically. This is not slut-shaming, by the way. It's just, it is actually motive for what happens in the movie. But yes, she apparently sleeps around with everyone. She wasn't maybe the best mom. She was cheating on Prescott's dad. And yes, so the person who was not arrested for the murder is this guy who has been in prison for a year. And the only reason he was the one was because he had a relationship with the mom. I know, relationship, it might just be sexual thing. I'm not sure. The movie never dives too deep into it. And Prescott, the daughter, buying her innocence, never really accepted that part of the story. So she believed that it was non-consensual. And that's why he ended up raping her and killing her. And yeah, so the news reporter then says that he doesn't really believe because the only evidence is the Prescott's testimony, and the news lady doesn't really buy that as enough evidence. So she wants to question her and actually do everything she can to write a book and have the man in jail freed Not saying she talks to her cameraman about this, not so much because it would be amazing to free an innocent man, but because her intention is to get famous from it. And that's her whole motive throughout the movie, is just being famous. She really misleads people. She tricks people. She does everything she can to get what she wants, even though it means burning a lot of bridges, mistreating a lot of people, really messing with their feelings as well. Wow, I talked too much about this. So just getting on with the plot. So there's all this dynamic that she wants. She's really always pressuring to talk to Prescott. She's pressuring to talk to the police. She's putting a lot of pressure on everything. Nobody really wants her anywhere, and the school is, after this second attack, the school announces a curfew. So the school is closed and there's a curfew in the town, while the police try to figure out what's going on. And Prescott is then, and we're about 50 minutes, an hour into the movie now, and people start accusing each other. So one character I haven't talked about yet is the most meta character of the movie. He is a movie buff, especially a horror movie buff, or a nerd, someone might say. He knows everything about slasher. He talks about all these rules about slashers. He talks about if this was a horror movie, or if this were a horror movie that they're in, these would be the prime suspects. And he's approaching the boyfriend. Because right now, so the police released the boyfriend because they couldn't trace the calls to her phone from his phone. And they have no other evidence. And she tries to kind of make up with the boyfriend, but he doesn't want it. He feels really betrayed by her. And then this nerd guy, it's one of those group dynamics you don't really believe, that this group of friends have one complete douchey jock, one pretty boy, one dog, and then I think 2 hot women, maybe three attractive women in the group. You never really understand why they're friends. It's one of those movie relationships you don't really buy. Again, probably just mimicking the dynamics you see in all the traditional, like in Friday the 13th, there are always so many different weird people in the groups that you don't really buy that they're actually friends. And I think that's what this movie is playing on it. But anyway, he starts accusing them, and the 2 of them do start bonding and start accusing him of being the murderer. And again, this will come back later. So, in the meantime, Gale Weathers is flirting with the police officer brother to try and get leads on the case. And he's at first very defensive, but I guess he has a lack of self-confidence, and also she's an attractive woman, and also she does have a news show and a column. And maybe it's just a column at this time, but she is locally famous. So he is persuaded to actually help her. He is seduced, I guess. And the rest of the movie takes place mostly in one place, and that is Lillard, the crazy guy, that I really like in this movie, but he's a very weird, crazy guy who really doesn't show any empathy in the film. His parents are out of town, so he's throwing a party at his house. So everybody shows up there. Of course, our main protagonist, Prescott, she is confused why anyone would celebrate when all this is going on. But, teenagers being dumb teenagers, they just want to drink beer. And probably more than just drink beer. They do drugs, they smoke, whatever in this movie. And of course, the brother knows about this, so he, being seduced by Gale Weathers, he drives her out to the house, and she is allowed in for a small tour where she puts up cameras so she can film what's going on in the house. Hidden cameras, nobody really knows that they're there. And we then see one of the girlfriends there's this fake out that is very popular, especially in Halloween, where someone does something and then, like, someone puts something on and pretends to be a ghost to his girlfriend, and then when the murderer does it later, the person still thinks it's the boyfriend, though it's not the murderer. And that's what happens here. So one of the girls, Lillard's girlfriend, is killed off here. Prescott, trying to make up with her boyfriend, ends up saying, let's have sex now. So they're in a room having sex. And then I think the most famous scene from the movie is the nerd character. I think his surname is Miller, so I'll just call him Miller. He is the rest of the party alongside him are watching Halloween, the first Halloween, and they're talking about all these rules that I talked about earlier. So he here brings up all what the do's and don'ts of surviving a horror movie. And after it's announced that I forgot to say that after the curfew is announced, the principal is murdered. And when everybody hears that at the party, they go out into the cars and drive home, leaving Miller at the house watching the horror movie, and the two people having sex. And I think I don't remember the more people at the house at this point. And here we have actually the other scene that might be very famous. Millard alone watching Halloween, saying, "Look behind you. He's right there. Look behind you." So commenting on what's happening in the movie while the Ghostface killer is slowly sneaking up on him. And seeing this, the cameraman wants to warn him. So he leaves his truck, realizing there's actually a delay on the cameras, and gets killed. And also Miller has been stabbed at this point. And Greg, as the police officer, and Gail Weathers realize that the boyfriend is at the house, which he shouldn't be. So they also try and stop it, but they are also attacked on the way. They almost make love in the woods, or at least kiss in the woods, but it doesn't really happen because he's on duty, as he says. And there's this big showdown at the house where the brother gets stabbed. Gail Weathers was an accident in her car, so she's also out of the picture. So all that's left is Lillard, Prescott, and the boyfriend. And this is where I have to spoil things. Because it turns out that there are two killers in this movie, and that's the boyfriend and Lillard. And I do actually think that this is a very good dynamic. So while playing on all the tropes of slasher movies, really just being a big parody of everything, not taking anything too seriously and being very meta about everything. Very ironic, very 90s ironic. This is actually not a bad idea. It's not a bad idea to have two killers. I do like that about the movie. This is actually the ending, while not being perfect, has some good stabs, and turns out they're trying to blame it all on the father. This was established a bit earlier, where the call to Prescott's phone came from the father's phone, so he's not a prime suspect for the police. They have kidnapped him and want to fake that they survived the whole situation by stabbing each other, supposedly non-fatally, while, also blaming everything on the father and killing Prescott. Of course, it goes all wrong. Gail Weathers shows up, forgets to take off the safety on her gun, so she gets stabbed. Then Prescott escapes. Turns out Nerd Guy's not dead, so he helps out a little bit. Gail Weathers comes back. It's just a shit show. One of them bleeds out. Lillard bleeds out because he was stabbed too hard. And the entire ending is actually they also take this, the joke with that the villain is never dead, he always comes back. So after the boyfriend is already lying dead, he does get back up and he's shot again, and that's it. Movie over. So I talked too much about this, and I think it's because I probably don't have too much to say about the other movies. I think I really didn't like all the irony of this movie. I think you can make a horror comedy that really spoofs and satirizes the entire genre while also being homage to it. So, a comedic love letter to these movies. And I think that's what it tries to do. But it's mocking the fans a bit too much. It's a bit in your face with it. All this fourth wall breaking, all this talking about movies all the time, all these constant references. It really wears me out. So in the end, I actually can't say that I will recommend this movie. Or I can maybe give it a low recommendation. Because as a film, it's actually not that interesting. There are a few scenes that are good. But overall, I don't think the movie is good enough to go out and watch it. Because there's so many better movies out there. I think it might be an interesting movie if you're interested in horror movies in general, especially slasher movies, and want to see how this whole thing was perceived in the 90s. To learn more about 90s culture, there are aspects of that in the film you would probably enjoy, but the film itself is not great by any means. But it did spawn a sequel in 97, Scream 2, and I actually don't think that this is a bad premise for a sequel. It does go even more meta than the first one and talk even more about horror fans and while commenting on the times it was made in than the first one. But it's not as full of references and all these talks about movies as the first one. It still does it a lot, but just slightly less, which I do like about it. So the point is that after the events of the first film, someone made a horror movie based on the events called Stab. So the movie opens with an African-American couple going to see the movie in the cinema, and everybody else in the audience is wearing the Ghostface Killer costume. And the two African-Americans, no, the boyfriend is just happy to see the movie. The African-American lady talks about how horror movies especially have a lack of representation of African Americans, that they're not really in it, and when they are, they're not really used well. They are just killed off or used for gags. And what happens is that both of them are killed in the cinema, and while one of them is getting killed, everybody in the audience at first believes that she's just really enjoying the movie because everybody is screaming out and yelling at the movie as things are happening. It's a very active audience in that way. But she gives up and people realize, well, she's actually dead. And it does have this moment where suddenly murder is not really fun for the audience. It does shut them up. I don't know if it's as profound. It was intended to be profound. But looking at it in this way, it actually, because it does talk about violence. The next scene is at university, because everybody is at university now. You have this discussion class. So this is the next day. So they know about the murders. So they are, I think it's film school or something. I don't know what, no, not film school, but I don't know what class it is at university. But they're having a discussion on whether or not violence in movies promotes violence in real life. And if movies are therefore accountable or should be held accountable for people imitating the crimes in real life. Because they were killed by someone dressed up as the Ghostface Killer. And Miller, the nerd, the movie nerd from the first film, is in this scene. And what I find interesting is the two guys arguing that, yes, the movie is responsible for these murders. Yes, they're guys, they're jocks. Whereas the person arguing against it is a woman. Actually, quite innocent-looking woman. She's also in the movie, it's established later in a scene where she's murdered, that she is, I think she's a Christian who doesn't really believe in alcohol. Not believe in alcohol. She doesn't have premarital sex, and she doesn't drink alcohol, which is why she started a party and why she's killed off. And I think this is an interesting spin, because she would normally be the crusader who argued that horror movies are bad, whereas the people who argue that they are not, should be held accountable for things that go in real life, are the people who probably defend it in real life. Another small thing that I do like about the film, a nice idea. Again, I don't know how much Wes Craven or anybody else, how deeply, how much they thought into this, how much thought they put into this, but I did like it. And we also see that Prescott is now, she is having an African-American roommate, which I don't think that's used to anything. So the comments on African-Americans in horror movies in the beginning of the movie should be completely separated from her as a character, because she's actually just established as a university student or college student like any other. There's not really any race or any other identity or discussions or anything else about her character, from what I remember at least. And they, of course, reacting to the fact that now someone is mimicking these murders, that the killer is back. And I should also note that this is the only movie in the franchise that doesn't open up with a phone call between the Ghostface Killer and the victim. All the other movies do that, but this one doesn't. So this movie plays even more on all the horror cliches. Not even horror cliches, but just cliches. So, the perfect boyfriend. Prescott has this really stereotypically good-looking movie guy as a boyfriend. Her friend wants to join the sorority that is led by this group of really annoying and boring girls who are very superficially empathetic and everything. And one thing I forgot to establish in talking about the other movie is it turns out that actually the murderer, the one who murdered her mother, were the two guys who just perfectly framed the other guy for the murder. So he's out of prison now. And Gail Weathers now has a TV show. After the murders start again, she goes to this college and wants to do a story about it. But even more so, she wants to have Prescott sit down and talk to the man who was, because of her testimony, arrested for a year. He claims that he has forgiven her, but Prescott doesn't want any of it, so she punches her, and the man is mad. Not only that, he thought the interview had been arranged between him and her, but also after this, Weathers doesn't even want to uphold her end of the bargain and have an interview with him. A 10-minute talk. He wants his 15 minutes of fame. That's his character motivation for this whole film. And soon after these murders start again, Prescott's boyfriend is put under a lot of suspicion from Prescott. She doesn't really trust boyfriends anymore after the events of the first movie. And he's quite understanding. He doesn't like the situation. He doesn't like that she thinks he might be a murderer. But he is accepting enough to give her the space she needs. Which, okay, sure. And her brother also shows up. So with everyone back, they start investigating what's going on with these murders. And it turns out that all the names of the murdered victims match in some ways the names of the people who were murdered in the first film, and in the same order. So they now try to suspect who might be the next target based on the similarity of the name here. And this is all established after the Christian girl, the girl I mentioned before, is killed. So there are now 3 victims. And yes, they start working on the case while Prescott is still trying to live her life. She's now in the theater. She takes on a leading role. And the film plays a lot with our expectation of who might be the next who might be the murderer or the murderers in this movie. There are some few new characters. There is the local reporter who really tries to get on the good side of Gail Weathers, but is doing a really bad job at it. And Gail Weathers is still an asshole in this movie, so she also just is really disrespectful towards this woman. It turns out that nothing really happened between her and the brother, but there's still some kind of romance, so they are flirting in this movie. And there's a new cameraman, but when they realize that all the victims in the movie are actually the victims in the first movie, or have the same name or the same role, realizing that the cameraman died, he quits. He mostly quits. He has already done taken some footage that they can then look at for evidence, or if there's anything on them to go by. So they team up with a nerd for him to tell them about the sequel rules of horror movies. And while in the campus courtyard, they receive a call from the Ghostface Killer who can see them. They split up, try to find everyone with a mobile phone. But the nerd, now no longer being a virgin, turns out is killed. He's killed in the camera van. And following this, they get their hands on the tape. The cop and the girl, they are about to have sex on the floor. And the killer shows up, chases them around the building, the campus here that's completely abandoned aside from those 3 people. They split up. Brother is killed. Gail makes it out alive. And at the same time, Prescott has been approached by the guy who was arrested, who desperately wants her to do an interview with him, without Gale Weathers, and that they will earn a lot of money on it, and that they will both get famous. He's the as I said, it's all he's about, and all this is building towards the big finale, where Prescott and her roommate are, while in a car, they are having a bag of two police officers who are always protecting them, but the Ghostface killer doesn't really care. Shows up, he kills both of them. There's a car chase where the car crashes with the two of them on the backside. So it's not really a car chase, it's just Ghostface killer in the front seat and they're in the back seat of a police car, so they can't leave the car through the doors. So the car crashes with the Ghostface killer being passed out on the front seat, and we actually have a good scene here with they have to slide out through the window passing him. It's a very suspenseful scene. That's a really good scene, actually. Prescott tells her roommate that she has to see the killer. She goes to the car, he's gone, shows up behind her friend, kills her, chases her into the campus again. She goes on stage, finds her boyfriend tied to the cross. She's about to free him. Then Ghostface shows up, takes off his mask. Turns out it's one of her friends in the group that I didn't really mention before because there's nothing really to say about him. He's not really an interesting character at all. Although he's one of the people who said that violence in movies causes people to be violent. And he tries to convince her that her boyfriend is an accomplice, and she therefore hesitates to cut him down because what happened in the first movie, Ghostface Killer gets tired of this back and forth with who might be the real, is he innocent or is he not innocent, and just straight up shoots him. Just as the next Ghostface Killer shows up again there too. And that turns out to be the local reporter, who is the estranged mom of the killer, one of the killers in the first movie. I think his name is Loomis, surname is Loomis. And it's also, I forgot to mention that the reason why he killed the mother and now killed Prescott tried to kill Prescott in the first film was because Prescott's mother had an affair with his dad, so therefore his mom left him alone with his dad. And that's why he wanted to kill her, for revenge. Now her mother shows up wanting to kill him for revenge. And the reason why her friend wants to kill these people is that he can be arrested and blame violence in movies, thereby going free. He was always just a tool in her plan because she kills him. And just as she's about to kill Prescott, Gale shows up, but she's shot. She's also pretty much put out of the picture for a while. And as Prescott is then again about to be killed, the man who was arrested for a year shows up. And he seems a bit unsure what to do, if he should go with help the reporter who's trying to kill Prescott or help Prescott. He ends up helping Prescott, but only by, kind of forcing her to do an interview with him. At least that's what's suggested in the scene. That's pretty much how it ends. No, wait, I actually forgot something important. It's not how it ends. It ends with Gale Weathers now. The cameraman comes back, wants to work with her. She starts to get an even better career. And also the police officer's half brother, he is not dead, he's just wounded. So that's where it ends, with him seemingly striking up a relationship with Weathers. So what do I think about this movie? I don't think it's great. I also don't think it's absolutely terrible. It's just not really worth your time, even more so than the first movie. It has a few scenes that are actually good, but aside from that, most of it is just boring. I actually had a really big struggle remembering this movie. I had to pause recording this many times just to go back and rewatch scenes, because that's a problem when you make a horror movie that just tries to mimic all the tropes without doing much new to it, and even with having very boring kills. You end up making such a by-the-numbers movie, such a mediocre film, that there's nothing memorable about it. So what about the third one? Scream 3 was released in 2000. And again, I have to say, it's actually not a bad idea for a sequel. This one takes place with them shooting the sequel to Stab. So the Stab 2. The movie made based on the events of the first film. So again, very meta. It has the half-brother now being the screenwriter on the movie because they wanted someone who had experienced. They had already tried with some other people writing the script. It didn't really work out. So they wanted someone who had experience, with real experience here. But the movie actually opens with the man who was falsely accused for killing Prescott's mom. He now has a big career. He gets a phone call from someone who pretends to be a woman, but actually it's the new Ghostface killer. He's about to kill his wife or his girlfriend. That's what he asked him, is to know where Prescott is. That's all the information he wants. He just doesn't want to play the game, so drives home quickly, but both him and his wife, girlfriend are killed. That's how the movie opens. And this also means that there is now a police investigation into these murders. And that's why the police now want screenwriter involvement in finding the killer. They also track down Gayla Weathers, wanting her to help them in the investigation. Whereas Prescott now has a self-help hotline, women or people who have been traumatized or in really difficult situations, to help them move on. So she's like a helpline. But she's self-employed, working from home, and she doesn't want to get tracked down. She doesn't want any involvement. She's still quite afraid of someone suddenly wanting to kill her because of her story of everything that has happened. And that means most of the movie takes place at this film set where they are filming the new Stab movie. And they recreated the house that Prescott lived in the first film. So we, of course, have scenes where Prescott is there and getting weird déjà vus and flashbacks to what happened. Prescott is in this movie also dreaming more about her mom, having her mom accuse her, saying it's all your fault. Not so much that she's the reason why the mother was killed, but more so that people are still getting killed because of her story. And this film's main trope is that it's now the third film in what they call a trilogy. So even though the nerd was killed in the second film, he'd recorded himself in case he would die in the sequel, so he could tell them about trilogy rules. And they learn that trilogy is all about going back to the roots. They're about revealing new things that wasn't known previously, about already established truths in the movie. And it's also all bets are off. Everybody can now die. So whereas the other movies also commented more on the genres, or especially the slasher genre, and on public discussion about this, about the audiences of these movies, this one focuses more on making the movies. It focuses on the actors, the producers, the difficulties of making a film, the often superficial and not necessarily smart people that are giving these roles. It's talking about how old people often play younger people in these films, how people get typecasted. It's just talking a lot about the movie making, but also about the industry. It talks about how it often exploits women. An entire part of the plot is about how producers and directors set up young women, aspiring actresses, with these people who were big in the business, who expected, in sex in favor of for roles or whatever, and all these things that actually. So in 2000, that was actually quite not progressive exactly, but not something that a lot of people talked about a lot. This is almost 20 years before Me Too. So in that sense, this theme is actually quite good. The execution is just really not good. So all these three first movies are actually quite well shot. The audio, the sound design is okay. The pictures look good in general. But it's just the acting, the performances, everything is so mediocre or even bad. Even when it's intended to be bad, it's not good or interesting. And nothing is good about the execution. It's so mediocre or below mediocre. And it turns out that the brother is not really over the brief relationship he had with the Gayla Weathers, who is now a big TV host, or she has her own show. She's doing a lot of journalism. She has her own book. published several books. These movies are about moving on and dealing with your past trauma, but also in developing as a person towards something better. And Gail Weathers is now finally not only selfish. In this movie, she's actually somewhat likable. And we have some scenes where the brother now moved in a trailer next to the woman playing Gail Weathers in the new film. And there's some good dynamics between the woman playing Gail Weathers and Gail Weathers, where they're talking about, my character would not have done that. The actress tells Gail Weathers or whatever. It's okay. It's actually, that's a funny idea. And there's this big bodyguard who's killed off very easily, and there's some cool things happening, but essentially it's just all these people trying to solve the murders because the cast gets murdered one by one, and the movie is being shut down, and there's a lot of chaos as a result of that. And Prescott ends up going to the set to meet up with everyone else and solve the mystery because the murderer calls in on her line. The murderer found her, because all the murderer wants in this film. So it's still very much that as long as Prescott is alive, this will not end. That no matter how much she tries to move on, the past will catch up with her. Because they're going through all these things, trying to figure out who has the motivations to do these things. There are 2 new police officers in the film. One of them is quite cool, but he's also a very mysterious character. And he becomes a suspect quite quickly, because there's something about him that just seems sinister. He's very obsessed with death and the downside to Hollywood. He even has a whole folder on Prescott with all the newspaper cutouts and everything about her and her life. So something is off about this character. And because they're all being chased down by the murderer, who, for example, one of his kills is that he blows up a house that they were all just in, with one not wanting to go outside. So not wanting to go outside is actually a bad in this movie. Normally in horror movies, they all said, so to stay inside and lock the doors. Here, if you stay inside and lock the doors, you die. Again, all bets are off. The rules are being broken. And they end up all in... So all the actors, the director, they all end up in, I think it's the house of the producer. So they all just want to have a party with everybody dying around them. They are in a really bad mood. They just want to ignore what's going on around them. While our investigators start realizing what might be up. So they also all go to the house to warn them that the murderer might be among them. And it's revealed that the murderer is actually the director. In the film, I hadn't really had thought watching it that he might be the murderer. But there was something about that didn't make sense because it ruined the movie he was making. So why would he go around killing these people? And it's also not told very well in the movie. I actually had to read up online what his motivation was. I understood most of it, but I didn't understand everything. So it turns out that he is the half-brother of Prescott. That her mother was involved in the movie industry. A lot of people who have been killed have been involved in this industry and have been to these parties where they've been raped and whatever. And her mother was one of the people being raped. And that gave birth to, and she gave birth to this half-brother who was, dismissed. He was more or less discarded. And then when the movie takes place, then 4 years prior, he went to the mother to try and be reunited, but she didn't want anything to do with him because it was the product of rape. And he therefore filmed everybody she had sex with, and then showed the footage of her having an affair with the father of Loomis and that's actually what made them kill her. And that's why he, in the movie, a lot of the plot is that he was the reason why she died, that I killed your mother. That's what he tells her. That's what is the mystery of this film. Like, was there potentially a third killer? Or maybe it was not even the two people who killed her in the first film that actually killed her. That's part of the mystery. But no, it was this man who wanted revenge for being discarded by her mother, for being a product of rape, from being a victim of Hollywood, that wanted revenge on Hollywood. Again, not a bad idea, just not great execution. The final scene is okay. He is wearing a bulletproof vest, so they have this funny thing with him being shot many times, but he doesn't go down, and then they shoot him in the head, and now finally he goes down. And yes, there's only one murderer in this film. Oh yeah, I should say that actually he does kill, before dying, he does kill the producer, the man who had these parties where the mom was raped and who might even be the father, so the rapist. So he does want to get revenge on all these people who wronged him, and then he wants to frame Prescott for it. Because it's always about framing in these movies. And it ends up with Gail and the police officer getting back together. So happy ending, I guess. Overall, this was even worse than the second one. I should stress that none of these movies are bad. Not compared to a lot of the movies I watch here. None of them are outright bad. But they're also not good. I think they are slightly below mediocre on average. But can I recommend the fourth movie? Scream 4 from 2011, also directed by Wes Craven, and which tragically actually turned out to be the last movie Wes Craven would make. What I do like about them thematically is that all of them touch on a big thing about horror movies or movies in general. So they all primarily focus their comments around one thing. The first one was slasher movies in general. The second one was more about society's response to slasher movies. The third one was about making them. And this one is about reboots. I mean, that broadly speaking, they have more. That's broadly speaking what they're about. And this one is a lot about subverting expectations and how reboots are made. So again, the movie opens with a phone call. And it's now there are two women in the house where Ghostface Killer shows up and kills them. Only that turns out to be a movie where the two people watching it are commentating about how predictable this all is. And then the one friend steps the other saying, "Oh, did you expect this to happen? Now just shut up and enjoy the movie." And that turns out to be another part of the new Stab movie. I think it's Stab 6 or 7 at this point. So it's commenting about watching genre movies, going into franchise movies, expecting something new to happen is stupid. That franchise movies have all these tropes they should live up to. And once you actually try and go beyond those tropes, try and do something new, that's when they fail. Or at least maybe I'm reading too much into that, but that's what I got from that scene. And this movie is not so much about Prescott or Winters. I should say I've made a mistake before. In the third movie, Winters hadn't written a book. In the fourth one, Winters has written a book about her experiences. And she's doing a lot of press release and she's getting a lot of publicity about the book. But then her sister is actually attacked back in her hometown. So she goes back to try and help her out, try to keep her safe and help her in this situation. And Winters does the same. She's no longer really reporting on these things anymore. She's in a relationship with the half-brother Cup. They're now both living in the town where the murders take place, so she therefore gets involved. But because she's no longer a reporter, the boyfriend or the husband no longer treats her as a reporter, and she therefore feels left out, and it creates a lot of conflict between the two people. And one thing I should say right away, this movie is much more violent. That when there are kills, they are generally more malicious and mostly better made, but also, so this came out after Rob Zombie's Halloween, and I can see some of the same violence in it. They're also talking about a lot about torture porn in this movie, about how that as genre has taken off and is, well, disgusting in a way. So it is, again, clearly inspired by the movies that came out around the same time and is commenting on them. But it does mean that also the kills are more interesting than the first three films. And it also plays on some of the things that happen with, the two girls are, after you realize that there's a new killer, so the two girls are at home, get a phone call saying, "Oh, I'm in the closet." They open the closet and don't see him, and then it turns out he's in their friend's closet who lives across lives next door, so they look over at her, and she's getting attacked and killed violently. And also, yes, so the daughter, so her cousin survived the attack, so she is now in the hospital for some of the movie, and then she's being looked after by the half brother or whatever he is, who's now a sheriff, and then his new deputy, and while trying to investigate these crimes. And the movie also introduces a new thing with there are now two movie nerds in it. One of them is constantly wearing a camera around his head where he's live streaming everything. And he always goes up to people asking, what is your favorite movie? Or what is your scary movie? Even after people start dying and they get the news that someone has been found, he asks whoever in the room, what is your favorite scary movie? Not really reading the room at all. So this movie comments on social media and the whole concept of privacy, of always sharing things, always sharing events, always knowing where everybody is and everything. It doesn't comment about it too much, but it is a part of the film. And Gail Weathers then goes to this group. These two nerds have a whole film group where they talk about all these rules for reboots and everything. And we find out that they every year arrange a viewing of the first Stab movie and turning it into a great party and a drinking game at this barn or whatever it is. And they do that this year even though the murders started again. So Gail Weathers disguises herself as an attendee at this event. She again, like in the first film, puts up all these cameras to spy on the event to see if she can find the new killer. Only that the killer finds all her cameras except one. Well, he also finds that camera, then poses in front of it, and when she goes to investigate that camera and find him, he attacks her. She does survive, but she is stabbed and is pretty much out of the picture at this point. And the Ghostface Killer managed to escape because people do show up to help out, but he escapes. The party is shut down, and this new group of friends, because there's always a group of friends, aside from our lead characters, we also have the new lead characters. And in that group of friends, we have the two nerds. We have this supposedly hot girl that one of the nerds tries to get with, who's also a horror nerd. And we have the cousin, whatever she is. And we have the ex-boyfriend of the cousin who cheated on her and tries to get back with her. And he shows up at the party saying he received a text message from the cousin saying he should come to that party at the other girl's. It's at this other girl's place. Everybody claims that no message was sent to him, but he now has nowhere else to go. So he's just at the party with everybody else. Everybody is getting drunk. Nobody really likes each other at that party. They keep going in and out of frame. So again, playing on who might be the murderer, because it's very often that you have people leave the frame and then the murderer enters or shows up somewhere else. So yeah, they start getting killed off one by one. And one of the nerds, the one not with a camera on his head, the long-haired nerd, tries to get with this girl, the hot girl he has been into for 4 years. And she comes onto him. But just as she does that, he gets caught by the Ghostface Killer. They mimic another scene from the first movie where the boyfriend is sitting on a chair outside and they're having this horror trivia game to save his life. Because the reason why he's caught is because they didn't want to let him into the house, because Prescott, I think it's Prescott, I'm actually not sure right now, but the girl is told, don't let anyone in you can't trust. Then the killer turns up, takes him to the chair. She apparently wins the guessing game, the horror quiz game she goes through with him, goes out to free him, and then it turns out that he is the killer, stabs her. So yes, Prescott is at the house trying to defend her cousin, but it turns out that the cousin is actually also the Ghostface Killer. So the two murderers are her and the guy, and they apparently have a relationship. And the reason why, I think, so that it is also revealed that during the whole film, they have put up cameras everywhere filming it. So they wanted to make a real horror movie this time. A movie that doesn't seem fake in any way. A movie that seems, yes, again, real in every meaning of the word. They're really happy about how well all the kills went, how well everything was executed, so to speak, with these cameras that they put up. So that's the point. They want to be famous. That's why both of them want it. It's not really about the guy doesn't want to do it for revenge. He would want to do it for fame. Because again, he's a horror movie fan, so of course horror movie fans want horror movie fame. That's, I guess, what the movie is trying to say in a way. But, the cousin is a selfish asshole, so she shoots him, saying, oh, no, this is a sole survivor story. And it is revealed that more so than fame, she wants revenge on Prescott, because she grew up her entire life being told how amazing Prescott is, how wild it is that she survived this so many times, how wild it is that she helped catch the criminal all these times. So she felt like she lived in the shadow and wanted fame for herself. She staged all this to frame it on her ex-boyfriend, while everybody is killed, and she's being the sole survivor. So she has caught the ex-boyfriend. She shoots him in the dick for cheating on her, and then shoots him in the head. And then, puts the pistol in his hand, making it look like he was the killer all along. And like in the first movie, and where they stab each other to make it look like they were victims themselves, she throwing herself into mirrors and everything, so she's all bloodied up. It looks like she was a victim but survived, and she puts herself next to Prescott. And the final scene is then in the hospital, where she is talking to the sheriff, and she talks about how wild it is that she has the same wounds now as Winters, who's also at the hospital, while being told that Prescott might survive, though she might have lost her memory. Which is a terrible setup, because this is not used at all. First of all, they talk about that she might survive. It kind of sounds like she's falling in and out of coma. And also the memory thing, not used at all. It's one of the worst setups I've seen in a long time. Because when the sheriff leaves the room, the cousin goes up to finally kill Prescott. And while the sheriff then goes to see Winters, and it is revealed that the wounds she has received, there's no way that the cousin could have known about them if she hadn't actually been there when it happened. So the sheriff knows that there's something wrong here. So that there is this final confrontation in the hospital room of Prescott, and actually the cousin is a really tough opponent. She manages to beat the sheriff, shoot the deputy that arrives as well. She's just about to kill Prescott when Winters shows up and saves the day again. She saved the day a lot in this franchise, to be honest. And after killing her, they kind of make up, may become friends again, and talks about writing a book, but making sure that it's not about these two people that committed these murders, because if they wanted fame so much that they killed for it, they should not be honored. They should not have the honor of being remembered for their murders. They should actually be forgotten for what they did. And I think that's actually a decent comment on... It's not really... Even though you could say that the entire Scream series is about true crime, it's never really commented on. This is the only time where it really is. There's a real comment on true crime, that maybe we shouldn't indulge in serial killers. Maybe we shouldn't give them all this attention. Maybe we should pay more attention to the victims instead of glorifying the perpetrators, as we often do. So, what are my thoughts about this film? I think it's the first one of the first four movies that I thought was actually a bit ugly. It wasn't as pretty as the other ones. Maybe the premise isn't worse, the execution just kinda is. I think it's the weakest of the first four movies, only exception being that the kills are better. There aren't even that many... I don't think there's even a single memorable scene from this one. The other movies at least had at least one memorable scene. So yes, I can definitely not recommend this one. Okay, fifth and final movie so far. This came out in 2022. And it's the first one not to be made by wescraven, because he sadly passed away in 2014. And it again opens with a phone call. This time it's this young girl who is expecting a friend to come over. And while getting a call on the landline, she's also communicating with a friend. And it turns out that the friend is actually not the friend. It's the Ghostface killer. And she gets attacked in her home. Actually, this is the best home invasion scene of the series, because there's a lot of technology involved. So they have these mechanical locks, and it's just very well made. No, not very well. He's a well made-ish. I think I'm starving for good content by this time point after watching 4 mediocre movies that I did enjoy this. And she is attacked by the Ghostface killer. She does survive the attack and is then at the hospital for that reason. But she's in a bad condition. So her sister shows up from out of town and she starts meeting up with this group of people, the group of friends she has, to investigate. And all of these are, again, quite stereotypical characters. I think, actually, in this film, all the characters, most of them at least, are allowed to be more than just one-dimensional. And I'm not sure if it's the acting or the casting or what it is, but I did prefer these teenagers to pretty much any other group of friends in the other movies, except for the first one. But I did like one of the characters, and I think some of the other performances were also good and decent. So I think that's one positive I can say about this. And they try to enlist the help of the sheriff, who is no longer working as a sheriff and he's also no longer with Gale Weathers because he tried to move. I think they tried to move to New York and start a new life, but he couldn't do it. So he went back and started drinking. So he therefore was thrown off the force and is now pretty much just a trailer park bum. And he initially doesn't want to get involved, but it doesn't take much persuasion. And then he gets back to try and help these teenagers survive the situation he himself has survived so many times. And similarly, Gale Weathers shows up to also help out again, because of course she does. That's her thing. And we are also quickly informed something that would maybe be revealed in the third act in other movies is actually revealed within the first 30 minutes of this one, which I like. And that's that the new main protagonist, the sister of the one who's attacked, who then left the town. She's an estranged sister. This is the first time she's contacting her after many years. And we find out it's because she figured out, reading the mom's diary, that her father is Loomis, the killer from the first movie, who apparently got the mom pregnant, and then the mom quickly got with another guy who then thought it was his child. So she's only the half-sister of the girl who was attacked. And when she was a teenager, she then confronted the mom about this, but she didn't know that the father was in the same room. So, stepfather, I guess, he left her. The mom got really mad at her and forced her or told her not to say anything to the sister. So she was just kind of pretty much banished from the family and went to live in California, where she now has a new life with a new boyfriend she has had for 6 months, who is a big character in this film. So after the attack happens, the boyfriend returns with her. I already said that, but her boyfriend is with her to try and investigate this murder or this attack. But her backstory means that she's directly tied to the events of the first movie. And what they realize is that by the rules of, I guess this is a remake, or even it's what they call a requel. So it's a remake and a sequel, akin to, I guess, the new Ghostbusters movies. They do make some examples themselves. So what we have actually been getting a lot in the last few years is a comment on taking all these old ideas and intellectual properties and then remaking them, while doing a lot of what they did in the first movie, but with a new cast. To like in with the new, out with the old. Also implying that they then need to go in and kill all the people who are involved in the first one to make room for the new main leading characters. So that's why all the targets in this movie are directly linked to the events of the first one. So the police deputy of the fourth installment now has a son. And they are then linked to the events because she was the one who helped take down the killer in the fourth movie. Which is interesting because I know how well these events are known. I guess they had to make it to the papers, but it did seem like in the fourth one, when that ended, everybody tried to agree that nobody should mention these murders to not give them any publicity. And there's also this, when they talk about who the murderer might be, who the next victim might be, And the guy says, "Oh, my mom was involved in the fourth one." Someone says, "Oh, nobody cares about the sequels." Well, apparently they do, because they're the first ones to go, both of them. And I should also add that this one is not called Scream 5, it's only called Scream, which annoyed me because it's one of those things that a lot of new remakes, reboots do instead of calling it. Because this is a direct sequel in terms of its storyline, so it should be Scream 5. But no, it's called Scream because it is a requel. And they even comment on it. Someone is watching a YouTube video while they talk about the new Stab movie, Stab 8, but they also just called it Stab, and they talk about how stupid it is. So again, I think this is just a provocative joke that ended up actually working on me because I didn't like it being called Scream and not Scream 5. And so that's why this is a very meta movie. Like all the other ones, they're very meta. It's also talking about elevated horror versus old style slasher horror, bad horror movies, or whatever you would call them. And there's a lot of this discussion going on, like between different fandoms in the movie itself. And what we get after the attack on the two people who were killed because of their link to the first film, we get a scene where the sister is attacked in the hospital. I guess the half-sister is attacked in the hospital. But it turns out that they expected them to be attacked in the hospital, so the cop shows up, the ex-sheriff shows up, saves all the two girls, but when they're going down with the elevator, he says that he has to make sure this is over, that they never go down when just being shot, that you have to shoot them in the head. So he goes back to kill the Ghostface Killer, but gets double stabbed and really badly stabbed and horribly killed. The kills in this movie are generally the best in the series, and they are quite good, even by modern standards, but also quite grisly. And I think it's because that guy has been stabbed twice and came back from it, and this time they just wanted to make sure that, no, that guy is ultra dead. There's no way he's getting back from this. And there isn't. He's dead. He's dead. So after he dies, Gail Winters is sitting outside. They had talked about maybe rekindling their love. They were at least working on going through why their relationship stopped working. And Prescott then shows up trying to help her, knowing that now that the murderers are back, she has to be there to help it. She needs to end it. She needs to finish this, that she still feels like started with her. But the sister instead wants to take her sister out of the city to save her. She's warned by Prescott and Winters that this won't work. They will always track you down, find you. You need to take out the killer, so you need to stay together. But they don't want to do that. But on the way out, the asthma spray of the half-sister is gone, so they had to pick it up at a house. So they drive to a house that is apparently a house party where everybody else is gathered. So all their other friends are there celebrating, and there are comments about why would you get drunk when you're in this situation. And one of the guys, so there's a guy and a girl who are in a relationship, but they haven't had sex yet, at least not from what I gathered. And he's getting really drunk because he hates this situation. So that's how he's coping with probably dying soon. And yeah, he ends up almost having the girlfriend asks if he wants to go up and find a place to have sex. He says he can't believe her because, she might be the killer. She gets really offended. He apologizes, goes out trying to find her. They use technology a lot in this movie, so there's this tracker on the phone app tracker, but it's a trap. The Ghostface Killer shows up and kills him, which again, another fairly effective kill scene. In the meantime, there are two more girls here, so one of them goes down alone to get beer from the fridge, whereas the new movie nerd, the one who takes over the nerd role of Miller in the first three films, is this girl who I don't want to bring this up as a political thing. I just think it's interesting that in these days where we talk about being inclusive, she is all the inclusive things in one person. So she is African American. I think she might be mixed race, though. I don't remember if we know who the parents are, but she's African American or mixed race. She is a lesbian or bisexual. She is a cool, powerful girl who knows a lot of nerdy stuff, but also takes no bullshit. So she's all the different but all the different things we expect from inclusivity in one person. And I don't know if this was done on purpose from the director's side and the writer's side as a comment on how you need all these things in movies today to sell them, to make them marketable, to make sure that they don't get flagged for homophobia or whatever, or if it's just how they wrote that character. But what I said before, that there's one character I really like in this movie, that's her. I think she's a really good character in it. No, I'm starved at this point, so any good character, any just decent performance, an interesting character is a good character at this point, but I liked her in this movie. I was rooting for her. And she also does survive. I'm already spoiling everything, so why not spoil that? She does survive, fortunately, but there is a scene where she's then goes down after the girl getting beer and say, oh, didn't I tell you about these rules of horror movies that you should never go alone? You need to ask for permission. You don't know if I'm the killer. And this girl seems to be very naive that, oh, but now, okay, but how can I trust you saying that you're not the killer? You might still be the killer. And the other girl's just, oh, now you're learning from this. Like, she's trying to teach all these people how to survive this situation. For example, the ex-boyfriend is at the house because he helped them drive there to find the asthma spray. So he says to her at one point, oh, I'll be right back. And they both have this, oh, did you see what you did there? Now you're gonna die thing going on. And there's also a remake of the scene in the first film where the guy is talking about, oh, look behind you. The murderer is right behind you. So she's watching Stab 1, watching the scene with the guy saying, oh, look, he's right behind you, turn around. And she's sitting there saying the same things to the guy in the movie, only that she does turn around just in time not to get fatally stabbed, but just badly stabbed. And it's around this time where things really get convoluted about who's the killer and who's not, because people start disappearing, people start dying, and we also... So there is the girl who wanted sex, there is... Everybody else is sent home by when the three people show up to get the asthma spray, they end the party. So everybody goes back except for the African-American girl, the girl who wanted sex, the sister who just arrived at the house, the half-sister who just arrived at the house, and then the boyfriend. I think, oh yeah, and then the other girl who went to the basement. Those are the people at the house at this moment. And they're all having this situation of who's actually the villain here, because they realize that there has to be someone present here who is going around killing other people. And why, when they're having this where they're accusing everyone, it turns out that the girl who played the naive role is the killer. So without wearing anything, she just takes out a gun, shoots the girl who wanted sex, who everybody seems to be accusing of being the murderer at this point. Everybody spreads out throughout the house. So initially, the sister goes with a boyfriend, but she doesn't trust her boyfriend, saying that there's always two killers, so they spread up. And the sister then finds her half-sister bound and gagged, but realizes, oh, she also can't trust her sister, learning from all these movies that we have seen that she hasn't seen. And it's now that Prescott and Winter show up. The girl tries to play the victim. The girl who actually shot him tries to shot the other girl, tries to play the victim. It doesn't work. They don't buy her bluff. So they call her bluff. She shoots Winters. There's a showdown at the house where it turns out the boyfriend is also a killer. So again, there are two killers, and he was the boyfriend. There had been all these red herrings throughout the movie. And the idea was that the boyfriend might actually have gotten together with her simply because of her backstory, simply because he knew who she was. And I don't think it was very well established, their motivation for this. I think they were just fascinated with the murders and wanted their own murder story. So they wanted to be as famous as they had been in the first film. That's how I got it. They just seemed a bit delusional. There wasn't really too much creativity to their motivation in this movie. And we have a few final confrontations that are really good. The female killer gets shot and burned at the stove. The boyfriend killer, gets stabbed really hard and many times. And that's pretty much how the movie ends. And what do I think about that movie? I think the kills are good. Everything else about this movie is mediocre at best. It's a better movie than the fourth one, probably also a better movie than the third one, but not better than the second one. I said certainly not better than the first one, but have to remember that none of these movies are actually really good. It's just different levels of mediocrity, or even below mediocrity. I think Prescott's character is best in this one. She is a bit cool, a bit of a badass. It's cool to see her really stand up to herself, to be, when you've dealt with this shit so many times, you just get used to it and you get really good at dealing with it. So she has a kick-ass leather jacket and just shoots a bit. It's actually, I'm trying to make it sound cooler than it is, because when I saw her, I thought she was really kick-ass at the end of it, but her character doesn't do enough to make it really interesting. But I know, I guess I should wrap up here. So the Scream series, with other iconic franchises, it dealt with all the tropes. It commented about how movies are made, how horror fans act, and how they are perceived, and how they do perceive different horror fans. Fans between elevated horror and slasher movies, or they talk about genre movies and all these, what we should expect from movies, what role movies play in society, if we can blame movies for how people act in real life, how the press reacts to not just horror movies but violence in real life. And I think even from that, it has grown, especially the first movie did grow into being very, not necessarily trend-setting, but it probably inspired many more of those parody or spoof movies. Not that it was the first one, definitely not. If we have many movies before this, I mean, Young Frankenstein comes to mind, for example, parodying all the old Hammer horror movies and Universal horror movies. So it's not the first one doing this, but I think it was influential. It was remembered, but it was watched about a lot of people. This, as I said, the Ghostface Killer became an icon in himself and became a slasher, an iconic slasher figure in his own right. But I just don't think the movies work that well by themselves. I can't really recommend you watch any of them, but if you absolutely do want to watch Scream, watch where this character comes from, watch why there actually is a small franchise surrounding this killer, this storyline. I think you should only watch the first one. It gives you, it's the best movie in terms of quality, and it's also the one that tells you the most about the time it was made, I think, because all the other movies kind of had to have some basis in that movie. So even if the other ones are also statements to what was going on at the time and comments to the trends at the time, they still had to harken back to the first one. I mean, the first one is the only one that has feels real fresh and really like a big comment on the time it was made. But I felt like I talked enough for now. This is way too long. Wow. I really hope this could be a short episode. This is, I'm wasting my own time here. And yours, I guess. Anyway, if you want to see my written reviews or stay up to tune with other movies I watch, you can check out my Letterboxd profile at The Robot Quits. It's also in the description. And yeah, I don't know. Watch Scream, don't watch it, I don't care. Take care. Probably the most memorable line from the series is, "What is your favorite movie?" No, sorry, what is your favorite horror movie? No, wrong again. What is your favorite scary movie? Oh.